Hello, everybody. My love to you all, and my great gratitude to Caroline and David for having invited me to begin this Mystic Spring series, which I can promise you will be tremendously inspiring and encouraging. And inspiration and encouragement are what we all need in this chaotic, dangerous time. I'm going to have the honor of presenting what I believe to be the original Jesus and the original message of Jesus. The original message in its clearest and purest form, so that all of us, whether we are Christian or not, can be thrilled by its proclamation that we are all divine, that we can work with our divine powers to create a wholly new world out of the ashes of the old, and that we can, if we plunge into the glorious path that Jesus came to give us, and Jesus came to propound, be divinized in heart, mind, soul, and body, and in ourselves birth the Christ consciousness. The Christ consciousness that is the universal love wisdom consciousness, beyond dogma, beyond religion. I want to dedicate everything that I'm about to do over these next 4 weeks to two people. To my great beloved soul sister, Carolyn Myss, whom I know you know is one of the greatest teachers on the planet, giving herself unstintingly to help us in this time, and to my great soul father, Father Bede Griffiths, who with Thomas Merton was one of the two greatest Christian mystics of the 20th century. He was a Christian, but he was open to all of the great mystical traditions, to Hinduism, to Buddhism, to the Sufi mystics of Islam, to everything, in fact, that proclaimed the eternal wisdom that, as you'll see, Jesus is such a unique and vibrant spokesman for. I want to address immediately the elephant in the room, and that is that, of course, Jesus has a terrible press because of so many of the outrages and corruptions that have flowered in the churches supposedly consecrated to his message. The Jesus that I'm going to be presenting to you never claimed to be the unique Son of God, as you will see. He never wanted, as you will see, to found a church. He came to give a path, not found a church. And his message was never about worshipping him, never about bowing before him as an unmatchable ideal, but about establishing yourself, the kind of relationship that he had found with the divine, so that you and I could, in our own unique, ragged, complex ways, start birthing that great love and wisdom consciousness that he had become one with and wanted with all his heart and all his mind and all his soul for us to become one with. So this is not a series of come to Jesus transmissions. This is a series of come to your true self transmissions. And when you really hear with your whole being what I am going to proclaim to you and share with you, you will become so galvanized by the thrilling possibilities that the real teaching offers you, the thrilling possibilities of discovering within yourself the essential divine consciousness, of learning the laws that he proclaimed with such gorgeous truth and nobility, and lived out with such noble and brave passion, and realizing through claiming that consciousness and following those laws just how powerful and transformatory your presence and your actions that flow from your presence can become. And in a world in which we're threatened daily by despair and paralysis and hopelessness, this message is the most triumphant and ecstatic and ennobling and empowering message possible. One that needs to be heard along with the great ennobling messages of all humanity's supreme liberators, like the Prophet, peace be upon him, and like the Buddha, peace be upon him, and like all the great saints and shamans who have realized their essential identity and realized the joy and the peace and the passion and the compassion that is born when a human being knows who he or she truly is. So let me begin my time with you today by sharing with you something that was given to me by my great teacher, my father, my soul's beloved, Father Bede Griffiths. In 1991, I was invited by an Australian film director to accompany Bede through the journey of his life for a documentary that was released called A Human Search. And I had already fallen in love with his work. I had read his extraordinary books in which he showed how open he was to all of the religions, but celebrated the particular noble message of Jesus. And I had for a long time rejected Christianity because I couldn't believe in the misogynistic, hierarchical, homophobic versions of it that I'd met in my childhood and adulthood. And I'd gone to the East to be initiated into Buddhism and Hinduism and Sufism. But when I was asked to accompany Father Bede Griffiths in his middle 80s through his absolutely astonishing and majestic life, I leapt at the opportunity, and I went to South India and found myself 50 miles from the place where I was born, which was Coimbatore, meeting the man who would change my life forever. Not only by what he said, which was extraordinary, as you'll discover in a minute, but by who he was. He was a living Christ, someone who had not merely believed in Jesus, but had understood the deepest lesson that Jesus is giving us, that Jesus came not to be adored for himself, but to open a path for all human beings, whether they're Christian or not, that would give them the joy and the power that grace had given him. And this grace and this power and this majesty and this beauty and this presence was living in this absolutely astonishing and absolutely humble man who swept my soul into his and taught me everything that I'm about to try with very much less power to teach you. So I will never, ever stop thanking him and bowing before him and blessing the time that we met. On the last day of filming, I went into his little simple hut in his ashram in South India to find him reading the Bible. And he put down the Bible. The Australian film crew hadn't arrived yet. And he looked up to me and he said, "You know, Andrew, we are in the hour of God. We are in the hour of God." And because I'm Oxford trained, and at Oxford you're trained how to ask snotty questions and in slightly superior tone, I asked him, "What exactly do you mean by the hour of God. And I thank my luck every day that I did ask him that question, because he gave me not only the map for my own journey, but the map for what we are going through right now. Remember, before I unfold this map, that this was 1992, and you'll see why that is so important. He said, we are in the hour of God because humanity is being brought to a moment in which it will have to decide between suicide or adoration and claiming its own divine consciousness, which has been given to it as an original blessing by the divine, and then acting from that divine consciousness to change the structures of the world so they reflect not the love of power, but the power of love. And he said it with such tender conviction that I just stood transfixed, because I knew that he was trying to imprint my whole being with something massively sacred and massively important. And then he said, humanity has now 3 choices. The first choice is to look around and see where the love of power has gotten it, and fall on its knees and call out for grace and transformation. He said this is highly unlikely, because that's never how humanity seems to work. And then he said the second choice, which sometimes as I sit here in this hut praying to God seems very likely, is that it will continue in its crazy addictions to power and domination of nature and tribalism and division and separation, and organize a terrible crisis which you won't be able to handle, which it will annihilate it and take a great deal of nature with it. And he said that on some days looks extremely likely. And then I wish I could reproduce his smile. He gave this gorgeous smile. And he said, but that's not what I think is going to happen. And then he said, Andrew, and he was looking at me with his piercing gold blue eyes. He said, Andrew, listen, what I think is going to happen is that in the next 20 years, humanity will manifest out of its craziness and hubris and greed a vast global dark night crisis. And for many people, it will seem to be the end, because it will be so immense and interconnected and seemingly insoluble. But just as the dark night for the mystic is the birth canal for the embodiment of a much greater, much vaster consciousness, and this is known in all of the traditions, he said, so this global dark night crisis will be the birth canal for a new, embodied, divine humanity, in touch with its divine consciousness, unified through great struggle and ordeal, and willing at last to step out with love and compassion and create a wholly new way of being and doing everything. And I was reeling by this time, but there was more to come, because he then said this, and he said it so simply, because by the stage of his life that I was meeting him at, he was at the highest level of enlightened awareness. He was a saint, he was a prophet, and he was a mystic, and he was the sweetest and tenderest and clearest of human beings, all in one, like the Dalai Lama is. And he leaned forward and he said, you know, the second coming is not going to be the return of some Star Wars avatar. I'm afraid my friends, the fundamentalists, have got it hopelessly wrong. The second coming, Andrew, is going to be the rising of the golden yeast of love and wisdom consciousness in millions of human beings, not just Christians, but millions of human beings who have been shocked by the difficulty and the agony of the world crisis into claiming their divine consciousness, and through grace learning how to obey the laws of that divine consciousness, and through obeying the laws of that divine consciousness, becoming empowered by a wholly new passion and compassion energy that will be able to build new structures, new institutions that will birth the truth on earth and realize Jesus' dream of the kingdom. And that was a very strong, as you can imagine, transmission. It was the map of where we are and where we potentially could be going if millions of us allow ourselves to be inspired by the great prophets and saints and poet mystics of the past, and realize that their great good news, the good news of our essential divinity, is the key, not only to living a much happier, much more joyful, much more compassionate, much more electric, much more empowered life, but to our coming together in the face of these extraordinary and terrible problems that we all know are erupting everywhere, to be blessed and graced by the divine to build a new world. So it's the map that I've been following in my deep heart for many years now, and all my work is dedicated to this second coming, to this birth of a new humanity. And it's why I am so thrilled, deeply thrilled, to be able to try with all of my limitations and flaws, and everyone has them when we approach the mystery of someone as vast as Jesus. And please don't think that I think I know everything about this extraordinary being or about the message, but I have been graced by a sublime teacher, and I have been graced by the Christ, and I have been graced by my own experiences through all of the mystical traditions, to be able to begin to see the outlines of a message that I know that when you open to it, beyond religion, beyond dogma, beyond any fears you may have of the Jesus that is a fantasy of the boys' club, you will be so grateful, as I have been so grateful, so awed and so grateful.